All right, pre-cal, we just finished example 6 in the last video, and we are going to move through the notes to closer to the end so that we can pick up rational expressions. I just taught it in a different order last time. So if you will just move with me here to, this is where we want to be, rational inequalities right here. We're going to skip rational inequalities for now, and we'll come back and pick that up later. We need to talk about rational expressions. Now, we've already talked about rational equations. That's what our other two videos were about. But now we want to address what an expression is. An expression won't have an equal sign. So keep in mind that every rational expression is simply a ratio or a fraction. Okay, that's why we call them rational equations, functions, and expressions. A rational function, of course, these are just fractions of polynomial functions. All right, what is the difference between an expression and an equation? Well, an expression means that the only thing we need to do with it is to simplify it. So these need to be simplified, not solved. Okay, these have no equal sign. An equation, on the other hand, needs to be solved and of course they have an equal sign. So reducing, we need to talk about reducing, and I mentioned this a little bit on the last couple of videos, but please keep in mind that when we're reducing terms are separated by addition and subtraction. For instance, if I have 3x plus 7, there are two terms here. This is term 1, this is term 2. Factors, on the other hand, are separated by multiplication. And they, of course, look like this. So an example of this would be something like 3x plus 7 times x minus 1. All right, this is a factor, this is a factor. They're being multiplied together. Now, within factor 1, there are two terms, and within factor 2, there are two terms. Just keep that in mind. All right, so how are we going to simplify these expressions? Well, unlike the equations, we're not going to finish when we figure out what x equals because we're not trying to figure that out. So here are some rules and steps that we follow. The first thing we're going to do is factor everything that can be factored. We're going to look for domain restrictions, and then we're going to reduce it and walk away. All right, so this very first example, I am going to factor the numerator. Okay, so there are my factors. So I've got my 2x here, and x gives me 2x squared. I need multiples of 15 that multiply to give me 15, but are going to add to give me 7. The reason I'm picking 3 and 5 is because this is 3x and this is 10x. Okay, so they're going to subtract. That's why their signs are opposite. And then this is going to be over this factoring right here. So I'm going to try 4x and x, and then I'm going to try 3 and 5 again. That gives me 3x and 20x. If this is positive and that's negative, that will give me a positive 17. Okay, so if you will notice in our in our numerator, we have this times this over 4x minus 3 times x plus 5. All right, we are going to reduce some stuff, but before we do that, we first have to find our restrictions, our domain restrictions. So I want you to notice I've given you these steps in an order that you need to follow. I factored everything. That's what I did right here. Now I find my domain restrictions. My domain restrictions are going to come from my denominator. So 4x minus 3 equals 0. So x can't be 3/4. And x plus 5 equals 0. X can't be -5. So those are my domain restrictions. And now I'm going to reduce. So these go away, and I'm left with 2x minus 3, 4x minus 3, my domain. X can't be equal to 3/4 or -5. This is my answer. Be careful, these x's cannot reduce because these are separated terms up here in the numerator and in the denominator. Factors can reduce, terms cannot. All right, moving on to the next one. I'm going to factor, always my first step here. My next step, set my denominator factors equal to 0 and solve so that I can find my domain restrictions. And now I'm going to reduce. So my solution here, or my simplified expression, is x plus 5 over x plus 2. The domain is restricted between, it's restricted to everything but to -2. All right, next example, I'm going to factor. All right, now I'm going to find my domain restrictions. I'm going to solve for my denominator. And then now I'm going to reduce, and now my answer, my simplified expression, x plus 3 over x plus 7, the domain is restricted to where x cannot be equal to -7 or 3. Groovy. All right, last problem. Well, until we get to the next one. Oh, y'all are not going to like this one. This is going to be rough. Don't fret, though. We got this. Okay, so this time, this 15 is positive, and I want a -13. So both of these are going to be negative because -3x and -10x is -13x. All right, in the denominator, please factor out a -1 first. It will make your life so much easier, which means all your signs will change. So let's see what this is going to end up being. Let's try 5 and 3, negative and negative, -3x and -20x, -23x. Yay for us. All right, so my domain restrictions, set your factors in your denominator equal to 0. And solve. So our simplified answer, the x minus 5's, will reduce. I swear. It's late. I need to go to bed. And then my domain restrictions, x cannot be 3/4 or 5. Magical and beautiful. I knew you'd love it. Okay, in the next video, we will do examples 5, 6, and 7, and then you'll be done for this 3.1 information.